The emergency signal crackled through space, weak and desperate. It reached the massive Vorthok warships floating in the darkness between stars. And Admiral Vexmore felt his 4 hearts beat faster with excitement. This was exactly what he had been waiting for. "Play it again," he commanded his bridge crew, his scaled fingers drumming against his command chair. The message filled the bridge once more, human voices pleading for help, talking about failed defenses and no way to escape. They sounded terrified, broken, ready to give up. Admiral Vexmore had been hunting humans for 3 years now. Ever since his promotion to fleet commander, the humans had this annoying habit of fighting back, even when they had no chance of winning. They would blow up their own ships rather than surrender, would fight with broken weapons and half their crew dead. It was frustrating and costly for the Vorthok Empire. But this transmission was different. These humans sounded defeated already. "Perfect. Sir," his weapons officer spoke up, "should we prepare the standard plasma cannons?" "No," Vexmore said, his voice getting deeper with pleasure. "Bring out the Soul Reapers. It's time to test our new toys." The Soul Reaper weapons were the pride of Vorthok military science. Instead of simply killing enemies quickly, these devices slowly drained the life force from living beings. The victims would feel their energy leaving their bodies bit by bit, experiencing terrible pain and fear before finally dying. The Vorthok scientists had spent years perfecting the psychological effects. "The humans will broadcast their suffering across their networks," Dexmore explained to his war council. "When other human colonies see what happens to those who resist us, they will surrender without a fight. We will break their spirit once and for all." His officers nodded in agreement. The humans called themselves tough fighters, but everyone had a breaking point. The Soul Reapers would find that point and then push far beyond it. Meanwhile, on the surface of Kepler Mining Station, Hansel Park was having a very different conversation. He sat on a comfortable chair outside what looked like a simple mining facility, sipping coffee from his favorite mug, the one with Galaxy's Best Grandpa written on it in faded letters. "Think they bought it, Minho?" Hansel asked his friend, who was tending to a small garden nearby. Kim Minho looked up from his tomato plants and checked his watch. He was a thin man with gray hair and laugh lines around his eyes. To anyone watching, he looked like a harmless old farmer. "Give them another hour. I've got 20 credits saying they'll try the fear beam first." "You're on," Hansel replied, pulling out his own money. "I think they'll go straight to the life-draining thing. These Vorthok types love their psychological warfare." Around them, other colonists were going about their daily business. Jung-Ho was fixing a fence that didn't really need fixing. Soo-Jin was hanging laundry that was already clean. Everyone looked perfectly normal, perfectly peaceful, and perfectly helpless. But appearances can be very deceiving. The truth was that every single person on Kepler Station was a retired Earth Navy veteran. Hansel had commanded destroyers in the Centauri War. Minho had been a fleet admiral before his retirement. Jung-Ho had designed some of Earth's most effective battle strategies. Soo-Jin had been a weapons specialist who could make explosives. Out of coffee grounds and spare parts, they had all been living quietly on this remote station for years, enjoying their peaceful retirement. Growing vegetables, reading books, playing cards, telling old war stories. It had been a good life. Then the Vorthok Empire had started expanding into human space, destroying colonies and enslaving survivors. The old veterans had watched the news, reports with growing anger. Young human soldiers were dying while they sat safely in retirement. "This isn't right," Hansel had said during one of their weekly barbecues. "We should be out there helping." "We're too old," Minho had replied. "The Navy doesn't want ancient relics like us." "Maybe," Hansel had said thoughtfully, "but I bet the Navy would be very interested in what we've got sleeping under this station." It had been 6 months ago. Since then, they had been planning, preparing, and setting the perfect trap. The mining station was actually covering something much more important, a secret facility that had been built during the height of the last Great War. The desperate distress signal they had sent was fake, of course. Every word had been carefully chosen to make the Vorthok think they had found easy prey. The transmission mentioned failed defenses because the Vorthok would want to test their new weapons on helpless targets. It talked about no escape because aliens love the idea of trapped humans begging for mercy, Minho said. standing up and brushing dirt off his hands. I almost feel bad for them, almost. Hansel asked. Well, they did destroy New Sol Colony last month, and they killed all those civilians on Harmony Station. Good point, Hansel agreed. Feeling bad officially canceled. The other veterans were starting to gather around now, all of them trying not to smile too much. They had been acting scared and helpless for months, sending out fake distress calls and making themselves look like perfect victims. It had been the hardest acting job of their lives, pretending to be weak when they were anything but. Above them, the Vorthok fleet was getting closer. Admiral Vexmore was probably choosing which terrible weapon to use first, thinking about how much the humans would suffer, planning to broadcast their pain across the galaxy as a warning to other colonies. He had no idea that he was flying straight into the most dangerous trap in human history, and down on the station. A group of retired warriors were getting ready to remind the galaxy why you should never, ever underestimate old soldiers who have nothing left to lose. The massive Vorthok warships dropped out of hyperspace like dark thunderclouds, their hulls bristling with weapons designed to bring terror and death. Admiral Vexmore stood on his bridge, expecting to see the usual scene of human panic. People running, screaming, trying desperately to hide in whatever shelter they could find. Instead, what he saw made him question whether his eyes were working. Properly down on the surface of Kepler Station, humans were not running. They were not screaming. They were not hiding. In fact, they seemed to be having some sort of outdoor party. Colorful banners hung between buildings, and people were walking around with drinks in their hands, pointing up at the sky and waving. What in the seven hells? Vexmore muttered, leaning closer to his view screen. One human, an elderly woman, with silver hair, was standing right out in the open. As the Vorthok flagship passed overhead, she actually performed what looked like a formal curtsy. Lifting the edges of her simple dress and bowing gracefully, behind her, a group of people held up handmade signs with messages written in both human script and poorly translated Vorthok. "Welcome, space visitors," read one sign, decorated with colorful flowers drawn around the edges. "Thanks for coming," said another, with what appeared to be a smiley face drawn underneath. "Please enjoy your stay," proclaimed a third sign, held by a man who was actually smiling and waving. Admiral Vexmore felt his confidence starting to crack. This was not how humans were supposed to behave when faced with overwhelming military force. Where was the terror? Where were the desperate attempts to negotiate? Where were the threatening messages about human defiance? "Sir, his communications," officer said hesitantly. "We're receiving a transmission from the surface." "Put it through," Vexmore ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was warm and friendly, like someone greeting neighbors at a community gathering. "Hello up there. This is Lee Sunya speaking for the Kepler Station Welcoming Committee. We hope you had a pleasant journey through space. The weather down here is lovely today, perfect for outdoor activities. We've prepared some refreshments if you'd like to join us." Vexmore stared at the communication console as if it had just grown tentacles. Did she just invite us to a picnic? His tactical officer, a veteran of dozens of successful invasions, looked equally confused. "Apps. Perhaps they've gone mad with fear, sir. Sometimes extreme terror can cause strange behavior patterns." Maybe, Vexmore said, though he didn't sound convinced. Or maybe they're trying some kind of psychological trick. Humans are known for their deception. Either way, he had come here to test the Soul Reaper weapons, and he wasn't leaving without doing exactly that. The humans could act as strange as they wanted. Once they felt the agony of having their life force slowly drained away, they would remember how to be properly terrified. "Charge the Soul Reapers," he commanded. "Target the largest group of humans. Let's see how friendly they are when they're screaming for mercy." The weapon systems hummed to life, building up energy for the first test. The Soul Reaper was the most advanced torture device the Vorthok had ever created. It fired a concentrated beam of energy that connected directly to the life force of living beings. Victims would feel their strength, their hope, their very will to live, being pulled out of their bodies like water through a drain. The beam fired, a brilliant purple stream of energy that should have brought immediate and terrible pain to everyone. It touched instead. Something impossible happened. The humans started clapping. Not the slow, sarcastic clapping of someone trying to make a point. This was genuine, enthusiastic applause, like people watching a fireworks display. Some of them even cheered. "Beautiful," shouted one man, cupping his hands around his mouth. "Can you make it more sparkly?" "My granddaughter loves light shows." An elderly man who would later be identified as Park Jin-woo was actually applauding with tears of joy in his eyes. "Magnificent. Simply magnificent. The colors are even better than I hoped." More humans were emerging from buildings now, many of them carrying folding chairs and blankets. They set up what looked like viewing areas, as if they were settling in. To watch a long performance, children were pointing at the purple energy beam and laughing with delight. "This is impossible," Dexmore said, his voice barely above a whisper. But the impossible was just getting started. His weapons officer was staring at his instruments with a look of complete bewilderment. "Sir," the officer said, "our life drain readings are completely backwards. Instead of taking energy from the humans, we're somehow... giving energy to something down there?" "What do you mean giving energy?" "The Soul Reaper's power is being absorbed into the ground beneath the station. It's not affecting the humans at all. It's charging something underground. Something big." On the surface, the humans had noticed the pretty aurora effect that was. Now dancing across the sky above them, purple energy from the Soul Reaper was interacting with something in the atmosphere, creating ribbons of light that twisted and flowed like liquid fire. Lee Sunya had pulled out what appeared to be an old-fashioned camera and was taking pictures of the light show. "This will look wonderful in the community newsletter," she called out to her friends. A younger woman, Ji-hai, was helping her elderly neighbors set up their chairs for the best view. "Isn't this exciting? It's been so quiet around here lately." Gin-woo was practically dancing with excitement. "I need to call my granddaughter. She's studying art at the university and she'll want to see these colors." Meanwhile, deep underground ancient systems were coming online for the first time in decades. Power flowed through conduits that had been dormant since the end of the U.S. last Great War. Massive machines that had been sleeping in the darkness began to stir. Fed by the energy that was being so generously provided by the confused Orthok fleet above, Admiral Dexmore was beginning to realize that something was very, very wrong. The humans weren't acting like victims because they weren't victims. They were acting like people who knew something he didn't. And judging by the way they kept looking at each other and trying not to smile too widely, what they knew was probably going to ruin his entire day. Admiral Dexmore had reached his breaking point. The humans below were still treating his weapons like entertainment, still taking pictures and setting up chairs as if this was some kind of festival. His pride as a Vorthok commander couldn't take any more of this humiliation. "Enough games," he snarled, his voice echoing through the bridge. "I forget the Soul Reapers. Charge all plasma cannons. I want that entire station turned into melted rock." His crew moved quickly to follow orders. The massive warships turned their most destructive weapons toward the surface, preparing to wipe out every trace of the mysterious human settlement. Whatever trick they were playing, it would end now. But before the plasma cannons could fire, something changed in the air. The cheerful, friendly atmosphere on the surface disappeared like someone had flipped a switch. Park Hansel's voice came through the communication system, but it was completely different now. Gone was the polite, welcoming tone of an elderly colonist. This voice was hard, confident, and filled with the kind of dark amusement that made smart people very nervous. "Thanks for the free power, friends," Hansal said, and Nexmore could hear him chuckling. "Haven't had enough juice to wake the sleeping giants in 40 years? Down on the surface, the humans had stopped pretending to be helpless colonists. They were standing straighter now, moving with the precise coordination of trained soldiers. Lee Sunya, the elderly woman who had curtsied so politely, was now speaking into a military communicator with the crisp authority of someone used to giving orders under pressure. "All stations report ready," she announced. "Power levels at maximum. Beginning resurrection sequence." The ground started shaking. Not the gentle rumble of mining equipment or construction work, but the deep, powerful vibration of massive machinery coming to life after decades of sleep. Cracks appeared in the earth around the station, glowing with the same purple energy that had been absorbed from the Vorthok. weapons. Admiral Dexmore watched in growing horror as the truth became clear. Kepler Station wasn't a mining colony at all. The simple buildings on the surface were just camouflage, hiding something much more dangerous underneath. The ground split open like a flower blooming in reverse. Massive blast doors that had been disguised as natural rock formations slid apart, revealing underground chambers so deep that their bottoms disappeared into darkness. And from those chambers, something was rising. The first ship emerged slowly, like a sea monster surfacing from the depths. It was sleek and black, shaped like a blade designed for cutting through the fabric of space itself. Its hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making it difficult to look at directly. Weapons ports along its sides glowed with contained energy, and its engines hummed with barely controlled power. As the ship cleared the underground berth and hung in the air above the station, letters appeared along its hull in bright white text. ESS Grudge. More ships were rising now. Each one was different in design, but equally menacing. The ESS Payback had a hull covered in what looked like armor plating made from compressed starlight. The ESS Spite bristled with so many weapons that it looked more like a flying arsenal than a traditional warship. The S Malice was smaller than the others, but somehow more frightening, its smooth curves suggesting speed and deadly precision. Admiral Vexmore counted 12 ships in total, each one representing technology that was clearly far beyond anything his fleet possessed. But the ships themselves weren't what made his blood run cold. It was the voice that came from the first ship. Orthoc vessels, the voice said, and it was calm, polite, and absolutely terrifying. This is Admiral Cho Hyjin. I died defending Mars Colony 7 years ago. I've been having very unpleasant dreams about burning. Would you mind helping me work through some feelings? The voice belonged to a woman, and she spoke with the kind of deadly politeness that people used when they were trying very hard not to lose their temper. But there was something else in her tone, something that made Dexmore's scales crawl with instinctive fear. This wasn't just an artificial intelligence or a computer program. This was the preserved consciousness of a human who had died in battle, somehow transferred into the ship's systems and given a new body made of weapons and armor. Impossible, Dexmore whispered. The humans don't have that kind of technology. But apparently they did, judging by the other ships that were now powering up their weapon systems. Had perfected it. Another voice joined the first, this one belonging to a man who sounded like he was barely containing his excitement. Admiral Cho, this is Captain Lee Dong-han, aboard the Payback. I've been dead for 6 years, and I've spent every day of it thinking about what I'd do to the next species that tried to hurt innocent people. I have so many ideas. Third voice, younger and somehow more disturbing than the others. Captain, Park Kyung-ho here, flying the Spite. I died when I was only 28, protecting a school full of children from raiders. I never got to have a family, never got to grow old, never got to see my little sister graduate. I'm feeling very unfriendly about that. Each ship that rose from the underground chambers brought with it the consciousness of a dead human warrior. These weren't just artificial intelligences programmed to fight. These were the actual minds and memories of people who had died protecting others. Preserved in digital form and given bodies of incredible destructive power, and they had all been waiting for someone to make the mistake of threatening humanity again. Down on the surface, the retired veterans were no longer pretending to be harmless colonists. Hansel Park was wearing a uniform that identified him as a former fleet admiral. Minho Kim had strapped on body armor that clearly marked him as ex-military. All around the station, people were revealing their true identities as some of Earth's most decorated soldiers. You wanted to test your weapons on humans, Hansal called up to the Vorthok fleet, his voice now carrying the authority of someone who had commanded battles across multiple star systems. Well, congratulations. You just gave us enough power to bring back every friend we've lost to alien aggression over the past 50 years. The 12 ghost ships hung in space like a pack of predators surrounding their prey. Their weapons were charging, their engines were warming up, and their captains were very, very angry. Admiral Vexmore realized that his fleet had just made the worst mistake in Vorthok military history. They hadn't attacked a helpless mining colony. They had awakened humanity's most dangerous secret weapon, the preserved souls of their greatest warriors, given new bodies and an unlimited desire for revenge. The underground chambers kept opening, and more ghost ships emerged one after another. Each vessel rose from the depths like an ancient dragon awakening from centuries of sleep. The ESS Vengeance appeared next, its hull decorated with battle scars that told the story of its captain's final fight. Then came the ESS Reckoning, bristling with experimental weapons that had never been tested in actual combat. The S-Fury followed, smaller but faster than the others, built for hit-and-run attacks that would drive enemies to madness. Admiral Dexmore watched in growing terror as his fleet found itself outnumbered by ships that shouldn't exist, commanded by people who shouldn't be alive. Each vessel represented decades of human military advancement, combined with the preserved consciousness of warriors who had died protecting their people. Captain, Lee Donghaen's voice came through the communications. Array again, and this time he sounded almost cheerful. Admiral Dexmore, I've spent 6 years dead, thinking about what I'd do to the next species that tried to genocide humanity. Would you like to hear my list? I've been very thorough. The Vorthok Admiral tried to respond, tried to establish some kind of negotiation or tactical discussion, but his words were cut off by another voice. Don't bother talking to them, Donghaen, said Admiral Kim So-young from the ESS Spite. I've been analyzing their weapon signatures while they were shooting at our friends down there. These are the same energy patterns we detected at the New Seoul massacre. These aren't just random raiders. These are the monsters who killed all those families. The temperature in space seemed to drop several degrees. The ghost ships had been merely intimidating before, but now they radiated a cold fury that made the void itself feel hostile. New Seoul, Captain Park Kung-ho's voice, was barely above a whisper, but somehow it carried more menace than any shout. They're the ones who destroyed the children's hospital, who killed all those evacuation ships trying to escape. The very same, confirmed Admiral Kim So-young. Her ship, the ESS Spite, began moving toward the Vorthok fleet with predatory grace. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a very long time. What happened next wasn't really a battle in any traditional sense. It was more like watching master artists create a sculpture, except their medium was destruction, and their canvas was the Vorthok fleet. Admiral Kim So-young specialized in what she called poetic justice. Her ship's weapons didn't just fire at the enemy, they somehow turned the Vorthok's own weapons against each other. Plasma cannons meant to destroy human ships suddenly swiveled and fired on their neighboring vessels. Missile systems launched their payloads directly into their own hulls. It was as if the Vorthok ships had suddenly decided to commit suicide in the most inefficient way possible. How are you doing that? Admiral Dexmore screamed into his communicator. Oh, it's quite simple, Kim So-young replied pleasantly. Spent my digital afterlife studying every weakness in Vorthok technology. Did you know your weapon systems are vulnerable to feedback loops? Your navigation computers can be convinced that up is down with just the right electromagnetic pulse? I have 6 years' worth of notes on your species' engineering flaws. Meanwhile, Captain Park Kyun-ho was demonstrating his own specialty aboard the S-Malice. His ship didn't just attack the Vorthok vessels, it played music while doing so. Cheerful, upbeat tunes echoed across all communication frequencies as his weapons systematically disabled enemy ships without destroying them completely. Why aren't you killing us? One Vorthok officer managed to broadcast. I will, Park Kung-ho replied, his voice still maintaining that disturbing cheerfulness. But first I want you to experience what those families felt when you attacked their evacuation ships. I want you to know what it's like to be helpless, to watch your friends die one by one, to realize that nobody is coming to save you. His ship released a swarm of small drones that attached themselves to the Vorthok hulls. Instead of exploding, they began cutting through the armor plating with surgical precision, creating holes just large enough to cause decompression without destroying the ships entirely. The enemy crews would have time to think about their situation, time to understand what was happening to them. Before the end came, down on the surface of Kepler Station, the retired veterans had set up their barbecue equipment again. They sat in their lawn chairs, drinking beer and watching the orbital destruction like it was a particularly entertaining fireworks. Park Hansel raised his bottle toward the battle above. Show them what happens when you interrupt our retirement, he called out cheerfully. I do love a good light show, commented Lee Sunya, taking pictures of the explosions with her old camera. Though I think Admiral Kim's approach is a bit more artistic than Captain Park's. Look at how she made those 3 ships crash into each other in perfect sequence. Minho Kim was grilling vegetables and occasionally glancing up at the carnage. Anyone want more corn? This might take a while and I don't want the food to get cold. The ghost ships weren't just fighting, they were expressing themselves. Each captain had spent years in digital purgatory, reliving their deaths and perfecting their understanding of warfare. They had become something beyond human military genius, evolved into pure tactical brilliance, focused through the lens of justified revenge. Captain Cho Hai-jin, aboard the S-Grudge, preferred a more straightforward approach. Her ship moved through the Vorthok formation, like a shark through a school of fish, its weapons firing with mathematical precision. Every shot was calculated not just to disable or destroy, but to send a message to the other enemy ships about what was coming. For them, I burned to death protecting civilians, she announced calmly, as her ship tore through another Vorthok cruiser. I spent 7 years reliving those flames, thinking about the children I couldn't save. I've had a lot of time to consider what I would do to the people responsible for putting me in that position. It's a battle, if it could even be called that. Lasted exactly 37 minutes. When it was over, the Vorthok fleet had been reduced to drifting wreckage and a few escape pods. The ghost ships hung in space like satisfied predators, their weapons powered down but still ready. The living humans on the surface applauded politely, as if they had just watched a well-performed concert. Because to them, that's exactly what it had been, a performance by their dead friends. Finally getting the chance to settle some old scores, and in the depths of space, 12 ships full of vengeful human spirits began planning what they would do to the next species, foolish enough to threaten innocent people. The last Vorthok battleship exploded in a brilliant flash of orange and white. Ow! Its pieces scattered across the dark void like confetti at a very deadly celebration. Admiral Vexmore sat alone in his tiny escape pod, watching the debris field that had once been his mighty fleet. The silence was deafening after hours of battle sounds and screaming. Around him, 12 ghost ships floated like patient sharks, their dark hulls reflecting the light from the burning wreckage. Each ship represented a dead human warrior, and each captain seemed to have their own opinion about what should happen to the surviving Vorthok admiral. I vote we space him, suggested Captain Park Kung-ho from the S-Malice, his voice crackling through the pod's communication system. Nothing fancy, just open the airlock and let physics handle the rest. Too quick, disagreed Captain Lee Dong-hyeon aboard the ESS Payback. He needs to live long enough to deliver our message. Dead messengers can't talk. Admiral Cho Hai-jin's voice cut through the debate with calm authority. We're not murderers, despite what some might think. He lives, but he's going to do something useful first. The ghost ship captains had surrounded Vexmore's escape pod in a perfect circle, like judges in some cosmic courtroom. Each captain took their turn explaining exactly why attacking humanity had been the worst decision in Vorthok military history. You see, Admiral Kim So-young began, her voice carrying the patient tone of a teacher explaining something to a slow student. Humans have this peculiar relationship with death. Most species see it as an ending. We see it as a career change. Captain Cho Hai-jin opened a broadcast channel that would reach every known civilization in the galaxy. Her words would be recorded, transmitted, and replayed across millions of worlds. This is Admiral Cho Hai-jin of the Earth Navy Ghost Fleet, she announced, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. We'd like to clarify something for any species considering aggression against humanity. We don't just learn from our mistakes, we learn from our deaths. And we remember everything. The broadcast continued as other captains added their own messages. Captain Park Kung-ho explained how dying young had given him plenty of time to study enemy tactics. Captain Lee Dong-hyeon described the benefits of having unlimited time to plan revenge strategies. Each ghost shared their story, and each story carried the same warning. Killing humans didn't stop them. It just made them more dangerous. As the messages were being recorded, Admiral Dexmore began to understand the true scope of what he had stumbled into. This wasn't just 12 ships with uploaded human minds. This was evidence of something much larger and more terrifying. The final twist revealed itself through casual conversation between the living, humans on the surface and their dead friends in orbit. Earth hadn't been losing battles for decades. They had been deliberately sacrificing their best commanders to build this ghost fleet. Every time a human colony was attacked, every time a brilliant military leader died defending civilians' Earths, secret programs had been there to capture their consciousness in the final moments. The apparent defeats that had made other species think humans were weak had actually been recruitment drives for an army of digital immortals. Park. Ansel's voice crackled up from the surface, where the barbecue was still going strong. For the show, folks. Same time next month when the Zelthari show up. The old veteran was consulting what looked like a schedule written on the back of a napkin. Let's see. The Zelthari Empire should be arriving around the 15th. They've been making threats about human expansion in their territory. Should be fun. Admiral Kim Soyoung's laughter echoed through space, a sound that somehow managed to be both joyful and terrifying. Wouldn't miss it, Hansel. Des got nothing on good barbecue and better revenge. Oh, and the Krillian Syndicate is planning something for next season, added Lee Sunya from the surface. They've been building up their fleet for months. Might need to wake up a few more ships for that one. Dexmore listened to this conversation with growing horror. The humans were talking about future battles like they were planning social events. They had turned warfare into entertainment, with dead commanders as the star performers and living retirees as the audience. The escape pod systems beeped softly as its autopilot engaged. The ghost ships were giving him a ride to a neutral world, where he would be deposited with a message for the rest of the galaxy. "Don't look so glum, Captain Cho," Hyjin said gently. "Shh. You're about to become the most important messenger in galactic history. Every species will want to hear what you have to say about attacking human colonies." As the pod drifted toward its destination, Admiral Dexmore found a small recording device attached to his seat. The message was brief, recorded in the cheerful voice of Lee Sunya, the elderly woman who had curtsied to his flagship just hours ago. "Hello there. This is Lee Sunya from the Kepler Station Retirement Community. We want to thank the Vorthok Empire for the wonderful weapons testing session. Your Soul Reaper technology worked perfectly to power up our old friends. Please tell your government and any other interested parties that our retirement community is always recruiting new neighbors. We have lots of underground space available, and our residents are very eager to meet anyone who might be thinking about bothering human civilians. Have a wonderful day." The recording ended with what sounded like a group of elderly people laughing in the background, as if they had just heard the funniest joke in the universe. Admiral Vexmore's pod reached the neutral world of Sanctuary Prime 3 days later. He was found by local authorities, physically unharmed but mentally shattered. Clutching the recording device and repeating the same phrase over and over, they turned death into recruitment. The message he carried spread across the galaxy within weeks. Every government, every military organization, every species with expansion plans received the same warning. Humanity didn't just fight back when attacked. They collected their dead and turned them into an ever-growing fleet of vengeful artificial intelligences. The war that was supposed to harvest human lives had instead created something unprecedented in galactic history. An unstoppable force of digital ghosts, each one more creatively dangerous than the last. All of them looking forward to the next species foolish enough to wake them up, and in the depths of space. 12 ships full of dead humans continued their patrol, protecting the living and waiting patiently for their next opportunity to remind the galaxy that some mistakes only get made once